They say land remembers its owner, even when the world forgets who it belongs to. For over 50 years, the Johnson family name was whispered on these fields. The land was more than dirt. It was proof that black families could own, build, and hold on to something real, even when the system tried to take it. But greed has a way of rewriting history. Neon banners flutter in the wind. Grand opening, the Oaks Plaza. Crowds gather. Laughter. Champagne glasses. Security guards in black suits. And in the middle of the celebration, a man in a faded brown coat steps off a bus. That man was Thomas Johnson, the grandson of Elijah and Ruth Johnson, the first black landowners in this county after Reconstruction. Thomas had left years ago, but he never forgot what his grandparents built. He still paid the taxes. He still had the documents. He still owned this land. What he didn't know was that while he was gone, someone else had rewritten the story. 12 commercial units, glass windows, luxury stores, and not one person in sight who remembered who owned the ground beneath their feet. To everyone else, it was progress. To Thomas, it was a theft wrapped in ribbon. Elijah's hands planting oak trees. Ruth's laughter echoing from the porch. Sunday gatherings. Barbecues. Children running through the fields. All erased. For profit. He could have screamed. He could have raged. But that's not who Thomas was. Quiet men build. Loud men destroy. And Thomas? He was raised to let truth do the talking. A woman steps out from the crowd. Impeccably dressed, pearls around her neck, posture sharp. Margaret Whitfield, the president of the Crestwood Homeowners Association. A name that carried weight and arrogance. She looks Thomas up and down like he's a trespasser in his own home. "Excuse me, sir? This is a private event. You need to leave." "Security." Thomas tilts his head, calm. "Private event? On Johnson land. This land belongs to Crestwood Estates, sir. You're trespassing." He pulls a folded map from his coat pocket. Edges worn. Ink fading. "Are you sure about that?" People move closer. Someone whispers, "Wait, what did he say?" Another person, "He said it's his land." "Sir, I don't know what scam you're running, but you're about to embarrass yourself." That was the moment it changed. When silence met arrogance, and the truth started breathing again. "My grandfather bought this land in 1948. Paid for it in cash. My family's been paying taxes ever since. You built all this, without even checking who owned the soil. Security, remove him now." Security hesitates. Even they can feel the tension twist. One of the guards looks down at the papers, then back at Margaret. Her confident smile flickers. For the first time, doubt appears. Within minutes, the story hit social media. #landback trended locally. People started digging into Crestwood's development permits, and what they found didn't add up. Behind the luxury signs and polished speeches, there was corruption buried under concrete. Thomas didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every quiet step he took made noise the city couldn't ignore. "Sir, can you confirm your ownership of this property?" Thomas simply lays the documents on the hood of a car. Hands steady, eyes calm. "Everything you need is right here." That's when the whispers started turning into headlines. And that's when Crestwood began to realize they hadn't just built a mall. They'd built a scandal. Injustice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits. Before we go deeper, if you believe truth still matters, hit subscribe and share this story. Because we're exposing the kind of greed that builds on stolen ground. By the next morning, Crestwood wasn't celebrating anymore. The grand opening turned into a crime scene, not of violence, but of truth. What started as a simple man's question, "Are you sure about that?" had cracked open decades of corruption and quiet racism that had been built into the city's foundation. The local news called him the mysterious landowner. Others called him a troublemaker. But Thomas, he wasn't looking for attention. He was looking for accountability. It wasn't the first time this town tried to take something from his family. Back in 1953, Elijah Johnson, Thomas's grandfather, fought the city council when they tried to redraw zoning lines that would have stripped him of half his farm. He won that fight, but only because he knew his rights and carried the receipts. The same blood ran through Thomas's veins. Quiet, calculated, patient. He didn't just come back to claim land. He came back to finish what his grandfather started. But behind closed doors, the people who built Crestwood Plaza were already in panic mode. Emails flew. Phone calls buzzed. Lawyers scrambled to find a loophole. And in the center of it all was Margaret Whitfield. The woman who once smiled for cameras was now signing documents behind closed doors, trying to erase a name that wouldn't disappear. I don't care what it takes. I want that land under Crestwood's title by next week. Offer him money. Threaten him if you have to. Just make it disappear. While they schemed, Thomas moved silently. He wasn't a man of power, but he had something stronger: proof. Tax receipts, survey maps, signed deeds from 1948, and a recent court filing with his name stamped clearly across the top. He had already filed the lawsuit. He just hadn't told anyone yet. The trap was already set. They built on lies. And lies don't hold weight when the truth walks in with evidence. Ms. Whitfield, did the HOA verify ownership before construction began? Of course we did. This man's claims are baseless. Ma'am, public records show Johnson family tax payments up to this year. No further comments. But racism has a way of disguising itself as professionalism. Behind polite smiles and legal jargon, they still called him boy in their meetings. They still said things like, "He doesn't understand how business works." People like him never keep up with taxes anyway. The same lines their ancestors used when they stole land from black farmers after Reconstruction. Different century, same playbook. He should just sell it. He's lucky they even built something valuable there. This isn't about race. But for Thomas, it always was. Because this land wasn't just acres. It was an identity. It was an inheritance. It was proof that his family endured when the world said they wouldn't. He could have taken their offer. They tried, multiple times. Hundreds of thousands in hush money. He refused every one. Because integrity doesn't sell, not even for 7 figures. The case exploded online. Civil rights groups stepped in. Law students began studying the case in real time. Crestwood had accidentally awakened a movement. The more they tried to bury him, the more people dug up the truth. They found zoning papers missing signatures. Permits rushed through in under a week. And campaign donations from Crestwood executives suspiciously landing in the mayor's re-election fund. Thomas didn't need to fight dirty. He just needed to stay patient. And patience, when guided by truth, is a kind of weapon the corrupt can't defend against. Take a second, subscribe and share this story. Because we're about to pull the curtain off a courtroom where corruption thought it could hide forever. When the rain falls on the courthouse steps, it doesn't care who's rich or who's right. It just falls on everyone the same. But justice? Justice doesn't always do the same. And Thomas was about to find out just how deep the system's roots ran. They said it would be a simple hearing. But nothing about it was simple. The city was watching. Investors were watching. And beneath the calm surface, politicians, developers, and city planners all had one thing in common. They needed Thomas to lose. Court is now in session. Johnson versus Crestwood Homeowners Association. The sound echoes like a thunderclap. They came with 6 lawyers. Thomas came with one, an old family friend, Ms. Carter. Sharp, soft-spoken, and unafraid of power. Your Honor, Exhibit A. property deed number 5542, recorded in 1948. Original owner, Elijah Johnson. Property taxes, paid annually, without fail, through 2025. The Homeowners Association developed commercial units without verifying ownership. The land was never theirs to build on. 4 years, they'd used the same excuses: miscommunication, paperwork error, clerical oversight. But behind those words was the same truth Thomas's grandparents faced. When the system is built to serve the rich, poor black families don't get the benefit of the doubt. Your Honor, the HOA acted in good faith. The records were unclear. We had no way of knowing the land was still under Mr. Johnson's ownership. Unclear. This land has been in the Johnson name longer than this courthouse has stood. You didn't check because you didn't care. That's when the mask started to slip. Emails surfaced. Internal messages between Crestwood developers, leaked by a whistleblower, exposing their arrogance. No one's lived there for decades. The owners are probably dead. Even if someone shows up, the city will back us. Ms. Whitfield, is this your correspondence? I don't recall. You're under oath. Yes, but it's been taken out of context. There it was, entitlement, so loud it echoed through every polished word she spoke. But Thomas still sat quietly, hands folded, eyes steady, because the truth doesn't need to be shouted. It just needs time. The case stretched on for weeks. City officials denied involvement. Developers blamed paperwork. But something was rotting beneath the surface. And when Ms. Carter pulled the final file, everyone in that room knew they were watching history. Your Honor, this is a certified court order filed 3 days before the grand opening. It halts all development on the property pending investigation. A court order? Already filed? Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Johnson filed it himself, before ever stepping foot on the property. The room went silent. You could hear the paper slide across the judge's desk, and with it, decades of corruption grinding to a halt. They'd built a plaza on stolen ground. They'd cut ribbons over someone else's legacy. And now, the law is catching up. All operations on Crestwood Plaza are hereby suspended pending full ownership review. The court will reconvene with a verdict next week. In that moment, the truth had finally spoken louder than money. But Thomas knew the fight wasn't over. Because when you challenge power, it doesn't surrender, it retaliates. A man steps out. Expensive suit. No smile. You made powerful enemies, Mr. Johnson. Walk away. Take the offer, before you lose more than land. That night, someone broke into his motel room. Nothing stolen. But every document, every photo, every receipt had been moved. A silent warning. This wasn't just about property anymore. This was about power. And power never loses gracefully. They thought he'd fold. They thought he'd sell his silence. But if you've ever fought something bigger than yourself, you know how this feels. Before we step into the verdict, subscribe and share this story. Because we're about to reveal a twist that shook the entire city. They say justice moves slowly. But when it finally arrives, it makes the ground shake. For Thomas Johnson, that day had finally come. After 4 weeks of trial, 4 decades of silence, and 4 generations of endurance, the truth had run out of places to hide. This court has reviewed all exhibits, testimonies, and historical documents provided in Johnson v. Crestwood Homeowners Association. We find that the property in question, parcel number 5542, Johnson Acres, remains the legal and rightful ownership of Mr. Thomas Elijah Johnson. In one sentence, 50 years of erasure were undone. The court ordered Crestwood HOA to halt all operations, compensate for unlawful construction, and either buy the land at market premium or demolish every structure. The choice was theirs. But the victory? It belonged to history. Black landowner wins historic case. City officials under investigation. Citizens demand property reform. Crowds outside the courthouse cheer. Some weep, others kneel and pray. But Thomas, he just stands still. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about remembrance. This land carried his grandparents' laughter, his father's labor, his mother's tears. Now it carried their justice. Ms. Whitfield, any comment on the verdict? No comment. That same week, the mayor announced a full audit of every HOA land deal in the county. 2 resignations followed. 3 officials were indicted. Crestwood's name became a synonym for corruption. Thomas walked those acres again for the first time in years. Every step reminded him of how much was taken and how much was worth fighting for. It wasn't about money. It was about memory. He didn't celebrate the money. He used it to rebuild. Scholarships, community center, land preservation fund. For every family who'd ever lost land because they couldn't afford a lawyer. If this story moved you, take a second, subscribe and share. Because the fight for truth doesn't end in one courtroom. It continues wherever silence protects the powerful. Thomas didn't just reclaim land. He reclaimed legacy. He reminded a city that ownership isn't always written in ink. Sometimes, it's written in blood and perseverance. But just when peace seemed to settle, the system moved again. He opens it. The color drains from his face. They weren't done. When money couldn't silence him, they turned to policy. A new threat, bigger, colder, and written by people who'd never set foot on his land. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a larger war, one between legacy and law. Stories like this aren't fiction. They're warnings. They're reminders that quiet people still shake systems when they stand on truth. If you believe legacy matters, hit subscribe, share this story,